It's Molson Canadian Leafs hockey on TSN from Edmonton, Alberta, where it's last versus last. I wish I could sell it better than that. How about this? Connor McDavid, young sensation against the team he grew up loving, his hometown team, those Toronto Maple Leafs. That's your matchup tonight on Molson Canadian Leafs hockey. It's a draft lottery type matchup tonight as we welcome you to the pregame show. You know the boys. There's Craig Button, Jeff O'Neill, and Bob McKenzie. James Duffy with you. Yes, two arch rivals. Okay, not on the ice, but in draft lottery, they are. Last year, the Leafs desperately wanted Connor McDavid. Somehow the Oilers won the draft lottery again. This year, there is a new prize in Austin Matthews, who the Leafs need much more than the Oilers. In fact, if the Oilers somehow win the lottery and get Matthews as well, they would vault past probably the Habs and the Sens as the most hated team by the Leafs fan base. Let's bring in Mark Masters to start our pregame show. McDavid missed the first matchup in Toronto because of his injury. How pumped is he to play his hometown team?
James, he's pretty pumped up. You know, he's usually mild-mannered, doesn't say much in the media, but this morning there was a different energy about him talking to the local Edmonton journalists. You know, he was cracking jokes. He was smiling, very nostalgic about his years growing up as a Leafs fan. You could really tell that tonight means something to him, and he'll be facing a Leafs lineup that is ravaged by injuries. The latest player to go down, Nazem Kadri. He will miss tonight's game with a lower body injury, and that means Peter Holland will move up into the #1 center spot. It's a big night for Holland. Mike Babcock has been very clear he prefers him on the wing. Tonight, a chance for Holland to prove that he can be effective down the middle of the ice. Kadri's injury also opening the door for Colin Greening to come in and make his Leafs debut. He was called up from the AHL yesterday. It appears, based on the morning skate, he's going to slot in on a line with Mark Arcobello and P.A. Parenteau. Now, another player who was acquired in that trade on Tuesday, Jared Cowan, he is not going to play tonight. The Leafs medical team did a scan of him yesterday. They saw some tightness in his hip area. They want to give him about 10 days or so to loosen that up so that he can really hit the ice and get going when he starts playing for the Leafs. James.
All right, lots more ahead from Mark in the pregame show. We could show you the real standings, but let's face it, these are the standings that matter to both of these teams. These are the lottery standings based on points percentage. So right now, the Oilers have the #1 seed again and a 20% chance. Toronto slotting in the #4 slot at 9.5%. These will jockey back and forth for the rest of the season. Perhaps never as finishing last overall meant so much, because remember, it's different this year. They're going to do 3 separate lotteries. They'll do one lottery for #1, then #2, then #3. So you could fall as many as 3 spots. You want to come last to guarantee one of the top 3 guys, because those 3 guys are something else. Again, if the Oilers win it, it'd be the 5th time in 7 years, which is ludicrous. The Leafs have never won a draft lottery. We mentioned those 3 players. So it's Austin Matthews, Patrick Laine, and Jesse Puljujarvi. If you watch the World Juniors, the 2 Finns were unbelievable. They've separated themselves from the field. But what is the gap between those 3?
Well, first off, James, you're absolutely right. And when you talk about the draft this year, it is a big 3. So where you don't want to be picking is #4, because there's a considerable drop-off after #3. But let's go one by one here. The #1 guy, Austin Matthews, 10 out of 10 scouts we surveyed had him as #1. But half of those scouts said they had to think long and hard whether Patrick Laine could challenge Austin Matthews. And then the third guy in that mix is Puljujarvi, who seems like a pretty clear 3, although some of the scouts have him a little bit ahead of Laine. Right now, I would say the only guy that has a legitimate chance to dethrone Matthews for #1 is Patrick Laine. Some of it could depend on the team that's picking #1, but the real salient point takeaway with this draft lottery is if you're in 1 and you really lose the lottery and end up in 4, you've really lost something special, because, as I said, the difference between the 3rd pick and the 4th pick is substantial.
And you saw this, the comment on the state of Canadian NHL teams right now. If you do the math on all those Canadian teams you saw on the board, a 58.5% chance right now as it stands that a Canadian team will get that 1st overall pick. So let's say somehow it does magically go to Edmonton again and the collective rest of the National Hockey League groans. Would they be the one team that maybe would or should consider trading Austin Matthews?
Well, I think they should consider it, but it's what they consider trading it for. And they need defense. And we're talking about an elite, complete centerman in Austin Matthews here. So let's just say that they want to look to the Toronto Maple Leafs, and the Toronto Maple Leafs are interested in making a trade. Well, to me, to get that defenseman, it's got to be Morgan Riley. And then you ask the Toronto Maple Leafs, hey, you want that elite number center? We need your 4th pick. And at that point in time, to Bob's point, I think the next unique guy on the board is Matthew Tkachuk. Rugged, tough, hard in the net area. I think he would be an excellent fit on the left wing for Connor McDavid.
Right.
Now, you might have to give Toronto a little bit more, but that's the kind of thinking that I would have if I'm the Edmonton Oilers.
If you're a Leafs fan right now, you want to dream about next year and the possibility of Matthews or Laine or Steven Stamkos and all these guys in your top 6. You may want to shut your eyes and continue to dream about that as we look at tonight's lineup. Because, man, down the middle, Peter Holland, Arcabello, Spalling, Fraze. Kadri, as Mark mentioned, is out. Of course, JVR is out. Bozak's out. So that's 2, 3, and 4 scores on the team. Odog, as you look at this lineup, do you remember a rougher-looking one in recent memory or memory?
If a trainer wrote down my body fat percentage on a piece of paper, that's all I can think about as a comparable to this lineup right now, because it's not very good. But this is the kind of lineup that Mike Babcock, you know he's just saying to himself, I would love to go into Edmonton and try to win a hockey game with this lineup. And as far as Connor McDavid, Darryl Sittler, watch out tonight, because the Calgary Flames against the Toronto Maple Leafs, they didn't even have their 2 best offensive players. And if you watch the way Toronto played in their own zone and they gave up breakaways, if Connor McDavid can find himself a way to get out there tonight against Frank Corrado and Martin Marinson, he might have a field day out there. I don't know if he can pass 10, but he might give it a
So
shot
what's your
tonight.
real over-under? 3, 3.5?
I think he's getting
on McDavid.
I think he's getting 5 points tonight. I think he's going to have a big time night. Come on.
Oh, man. Well, let's look at McDavid since he came back after the injury, and it was a startling beginning. 3 points in his debut against Columbus was unbelievable. A couple more assists as they were all over Ottawa. And since then, he's calmed down a little bit. A goal against the Islanders and an assist against New Jersey. Still, 7 points in 5 games is impressive. When you compare him to the leading rookie scorers in the National Hockey League, he's the only guy over a point per game at 1.06. Artemi Panarin, that Blackhawks super rookie, is next at .93. Again, McDavid's only played 18 games, but boy, has he teased us to what is likely ahead. Our Ryan Rashog covers Connor McDavid daily, covering this game tonight for us as well. Questions arose about the leadership of the Oilers once again after they got hot in those 2 awful performances against Montreal and the New York Islanders. Do you think they'll fill that vacancy at captain, perhaps with McDavid as early as the start of next season?
Yeah, James, for my money, that might be a little bit quick to put the C on McDavid's shoulder. I think we could see him get it next year. I don't know if it'll be right off the bat. A couple things to consider. He missed almost half this entire season, so if they were to do that, he would have under 50 NHL games under his belt before trying to become a leader of men. Also, McDavid is going to be under all kinds of pressure every game, every season to produce points, and I think maybe they'd want to give him a little more time to get comfortable as a point producer at this level before putting him in charge of the leadership in that dressing room as well. So I could see them giving it to him. It's a foregone conclusion in my mind. He will be the next captain of this team, but maybe after the All-Star break or the start of the following season might make a little bit more sense, James.
That line of McDavid, Pouliot, and Eberle, like McDavid, were fantastic in those first couple of games. It cooled off a little bit since. What's your assessment of that trio?
Yeah, do you know what? They started out like gangbusters the first couple of games. I think they had 5 goals in their first 2 games, and then they really cooled off. And Todd McClellan talked about it today a little bit. I think they were trying to force the puck to Connor a little bit too much on the breakouts. They were always looking for him, trying to force some plays through the neutral zone, and as a result, they didn't have a lot of flow through the neutral zone. So I think the last couple of games, it's definitely fallen off. But look, this is a really important look that the Edmonton Oilers are getting with Jordan Eberle in particular next to Connor McDavid. There's a lot of talk here in Edmonton, James, about the Oilers needing to trade a good young forward for a defenseman. They desperately need help. Jordan Eberle is a player that could bring that type of return. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins as well. But if they're even going to consider trading Jordan Eberle, they have to first take a prolonged look at him next to Connor McDavid. Because if that's where the magic happens to lie, if that's the fantastic duo, there's no way they can trade Jordan Eberle. So this is an important look they're getting. It's been okay so far. I think it has lots of potential to get better.
Good stuff. Ryan Rashad covering the Oilers for us tonight. Mark Masters, the Maple Leafs. And by the way, Mark will have an interview with Connor McDavid a little bit later on in the pregame show.